Hi there! If this is your first time here, welcome to the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast. I'm your host, Markella Kaplani, a psychologist, a parenthood and relationship coach, and a parent myself. Together, we explore the transformative journey of parenthood and its profound impact on our relationship with ourselves, our partners, and our children, so that we can be present and show up as we envision without having to do more. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to the podcast. It's been a month and I cannot believe it. If you've been tuning in regularly, I want to say that I am so thankful to you. I really appreciate it. And if you want to support my efforts, then I would love it if you would hit the link in the description and give me your honest review of this podcast. Your support will help me reach more listeners and will help get the word out there so that mothers and fathers and couples who enter parenthood can have this support system, and we can slowly build a community where we can uplift and learn from one another. Before we get into today's topic, I want to wish you Happy Mother's Day. While there are several things I object to when it comes to branding certain things as special occasions, because it only reinforces their devaluation the rest of the year, in my opinion. I'm not a total heretic. I can see that there is something beautiful about setting aside a day to honor the birth of the mother, as we honor the birth of each child. Because in many ways, we are completely reborn as we enter motherhood, and each child brings a whole new rebirth. But along with being born again, in terms of the identity shift we've been discussing, for those of you who have been hanging around, for me it was also the birth of an entire set of new emotions, two of them being guilt and shame. I have since heard many women describe how in becoming a mother, it's like a switch turned permanently on, and we're constantly feeling guilty or shameful for something we did or did not do well for our children. And so this is exactly what we're getting into today, this excessive feeling of mom guilt and mom shame. Why we feel it, what triggers it, and how we can begin to minimize it. I also have a segment for the partners who are listening, because I really hope you guys are, so that you can know how to spot if your partner, your wife, the mother of your child is experiencing these emotions, even if she's not mentioning it, even if she may not know exactly how to pinpoint what it is that she's feeling, and how you can act as support for her to combat the guilt and shame that she may be feeling. I think this is one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, that I decided to start working with mothers and then with couples. But it really was the main reason why I decided to focus on understanding motherhood psychology and what we now know as the process of matrescence, this rite of passage into motherhood where everything basically changes. Before we began, I wanted to share the reason why this episode is happening today. Lately, it's been a little bit of a rough phase for my son. Like many kids, especially COVID babies, he's been having some difficulty in the socializing component. And in many cases, I have caught myself feeling very heavy inside, carrying this burden as though it is my fault that this is happening, that maybe I overdid it, because, this is exactly what happens to mothers. You can never get it right. If I were working full time, then I could have told myself that I'm not there enough in order to foster healthy confidence and self-concept. But then again, in my case, that I've decided to work way less in order to be more present, that is not okay either. You can turn that around just as well and say, it was COVID and then you're home all the time. You are his go-to person. And so that's what happens. Whenever you're around, he doesn't want to socialize with anybody. He is too attached to you. He feels too safe, if there is such a thing. And this doesn't give him the incentive to want to go out and create new bonds. I want to note here that I'm not saying any of this as a fact. I am saying it as thoughts that go through our heads or even thoughts that are expressed. So in several situations that have been socially uncomfortable for my son lately, which have made me feel socially uncomfortable as well, I've had parents tell me that if you weren't here, it would probably be better. And while the intention is to help me feel better, that he would be able to adjust, it's just that I'm his safety blanket in a way. At the same time, for a person who is feeling like, I don't know, maybe I haven't fostered something in this child, maybe I have missed something, this kind of comment can trigger a thought that, oh, well, so am I the problem? And the distinction here is that I know that this is not the case. Logically and rationally, I can tell you that this makes no sense. It's always a good thing that a child feels safe. It's a good thing if your child is breaking down in front of you. It means that they know that you love them unconditionally. It means that they know that this is their safe space where they can let go and be authentic and be themselves and know that there is no judgment and there will be no retraction of love. So these are all good things. And I know this rationally, but then emotionally, that's a whole different ballgame. And so I'm devoting this episode to the concept of mom guilt or mom shame because it is something that for me is very new. I wasn't a person that felt guilt often. I definitely wasn't a person that felt shame. And that's because I've always been the type to think, okay, you've made a mistake. And yes, you're going to feel guilty about the mistake for a second, but then what do you do to fix it? And sometimes there is no fixing the specific thing that's happened other than apologizing and really committing to not doing something like that again. But for me, that was it. And then I became a mother, and suddenly all these feelings of guilt and shame started rushing in, and it was a whole new experience for me. Now, I do know a lot of people that felt guilt and shame quite often before becoming a parent, but even in their case, they've described to me how it has been exponentially multiplied ever since becoming parents. Therefore, if you are in this category, if you too feel that a lot of times guilt and shame get in the way of you enjoying motherhood as much as you would like, that they might be even getting in the way of how you show up for your child in their upbringing, that it may be affecting your parenting, and that maybe even it is also affecting how you show up as a partner, then this is the episode for you. If along the way you find that this is a topic that really resonates with you, please know that I've put a mini video series together on matrescence, the transformation that women undergo during motherhood, and it covers everything from how motherhood impacts our relationships to how it influences our work and our spiritual lives, along with practical steps to help you reconnect with who you were and embrace who you are becoming. This helps with dealing with feeling shame and guilt, because a lot of times our guilt and our shame come from that part of us deep inside that's longing for our old selves, that hasn't found a way to bridge the old self with who we are becoming. It's a great resource, but for now, why don't you grab your coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's get into it. It's time to shed some light on mom guilt and shame, and most importantly, to find ways to overcome these together. Let's start by getting clear about what we mean when we talk about guilt and shame. Because while these emotions often go hand in hand, they are quite distinct from each other. And I have a knack for distinguishing them because they are not the same. First up is guilt. Guilt is a feeling that arises when we believe that we've done something wrong or that we failed to do something right. It's very action-oriented. For example, you might be feeling guilty if you've lost your patience or you've snapped at your child during a stressful moment. This feeling is your internal moral compass of sorts. saying that, hey, you know what happened just now? Well, that's not the kind of parent that you want to be. Guilt, in this sense, really is an alert. It talks about our actions and it looks at this discrepancy between what we did and who we aspire to be, what we would have ideally wanted to have done. You can see that guilt, in this sense, can actually be very healthy, and it's there for a reason. Guilt has served us in the past. Back in the cave days, we really, really needed to be part of the group in order to survive, because being ostracized meant you would die. You would die of cold, of famine, probably just because some kind of big animal attacked you, and being just one human being, you wouldn't be able to defend yourself. So it was extremely important that we were liked by the tribe and that we fit in. Guilt, then, was a way for us to be able to kind of keep ourselves in check when we would do something that bothered everybody else. So then the reason for guilt there is that you would notice that all your other comrades are disappointed in you. You would see that they disapprove of what you've done. You would start to feel like your place in the tribe is being challenged, that you might be outcast. Every emotion that we have is there for a reason. It has its purpose, and every emotion can become dysfunctional whether we feel very, very little of it or we feel too much of it. Now, shifting over to shame, well, shame takes things a step deeper and darker. It's not just about what you did or you didn't do, it's about who you are. When we feel shame, it's as if there's a voice inside us saying, I am a bad parent, I'm an awful mother, I'm not enough, I did something bad. Shame hits at the core of our identity, and that is the main difference. It's not action-oriented, it's about our identity. It attacks who we believe ourselves to be, which makes it much heavier and a much more painful emotion. Understanding these differences is crucial. Guilt can be a helpful guide, a nudge towards becoming better. So feeling guilty that I snapped at my son, for example, when I could have really just handled it quite differently and alleviated the situation for everybody. Now, that kind of an emotion, so long as it is contained, right? Because if it isn't, then it will turn into shame. It's quite functional. It helps me maintain my goal of being a gentler parent. It maintains my goal of regulating myself emotionally before I can teach my son to regulate himself, right? So guilt in this way keeps me in check for my goals, first and foremost, for the things that I want to do, for the way that I want to show up, for the way that I want to see myself. Shame, however, is much more insidious. It suggests that our very selves are flawed, which can lead to a damaging and often unjustified narrative about our worth as individuals and as parents. Both emotions are very common in parenting, where every day can feel like a series of judgment calls. But recognizing whether we're feeling guilty about a specific action or carrying that weight of shame about our identity can help us address these feelings more effectively. So now that we have a better grasp of what guilt and shame are, let's explore why these emotions are particularly significant in the context of motherhood. It's interesting to note how these feelings often manifest differently in mothers compared to fathers. One of the key reasons why guilt and shame seem to be more prevalent among mothers is deeply rooted in societal expectations and cultural norms. Historically, as women, we've been assigned this role of primary caregivers. This role comes not only with responsibilities, which are heavy and cause this mental load that many women talk about, but also it comes with this enormous load of societal pressure to be perfect, to be selfless, to always put the child's needs first. When we as mothers feel that we're falling short of these superhuman expectations, and so since they're superhuman, we will be falling short, all the time, guilt and shame can quickly take hold. And also, I want you to think about it this way. The way that mothers talk about their experiences often reflects these pressures. It's common to hear mothers confessing to feeling guilty for things like going back to work, choosing formula over breastfeeding, or just needing time alone. Concerns that are less frequently voiced by fathers. This isn't to say that dads don't experience guilt or shame, but the cultural scripts for fathers often emphasize providing rather than this nitpicking of all things caregiving, which can carry a different set of expectations and pressures. And then comes this maternal instinct myth that plays a huge role here. This is the belief that all mothers, by virtue of their biology, should have this natural, all-consuming, nurturing instinct. When a mother doesn't feel this way all the time, because, well, let's face it, no one could possibly feel perfectly attuned and loving every moment of every day, the gap between reality and this myth of what makes a good mother can trigger intense feelings of guilt and shame. So in the context of motherhood, guilt and shame are not just about what is being experienced internally. These emotions are amplified by external expectations and the pervasive, often unspoken belief that motherhood should come naturally and joyfully without any feelings of, let's say, ambivalence or frustration. This sets a very, very unrealistic bar where anything short of perfection can feel like a profound failure. And here, perfection is not just about what you do, it's also about how you feel. Do you see where this is becoming quite irrational? You're not even allowed to feel overwhelm or frustration or regret or loss. Even these things can lead to feeling imperfect and like you're failing. So for me in my environment, no one has actually ever told me explicitly that I should have stayed home more or that I should have gone to work more. No one has really voiced particular expectations. However, it would probably be very unfair to say that this is all just coming from me and my own expectations. In the past, I have taken it all onto myself, and I've said that all this pressure that I feel, I have inflicted upon myself. I have told myself I need to be this way. I have decided that I want to be simultaneously both at work and with my child. I have put this pressure on myself as if there's somebody counting the hours of what's enough time and what's too much time and what's too little time. But if you really think about it, this really is a societal issue. And it is unfair for us as mothers to disregard how much it affects us, how much these stories have been ingrained within us through what we see around us, through what we hear, through comments that we may have heard way before we even conceived becoming parents. So if this is you, if you're feeling guilt and shame, and then you look around you and you say, hey, no one is telling me I need to be this way or that way. No one is expressing discontent with the way that I'm mothering. I have a very supportive circle. Why am I feeling this way? Well, you are carrying the load that mothers have been carrying for centuries, really. Understanding why we as mothers often feel overwhelmed by guilt and shame requires us to look back through history. If we unpack the history a little bit, the role of a mother has been idealized in countless ways, painting a picture of nurturing and sacrifice as the golden standard. This archetype of the perfect mother is deeply embedded in many cultures and religions, being reflected in literature, art, the media. From the selfless, ever-patient figure who places her children's needs above her own in every situation, this image has set this lofty benchmark for motherhood. The historical portrayal of what a mom needs to be, of this sacrificial figure, still impacts modern expectations to this day. It is still very prevalent, where despite significant social and economic changes that demand that a mother often balance career and family life, the underlying expectation to remain primarily devoted to our children persists. So this is kind of like when prices rise for all the commodities that we need in order to survive, but pay doesn't. Women started to enter the workspace, and in achieving this milestone in securing our rights, we were punished by still having to uphold the primary caregiving archetype, the sacrificial archetype. These age-old perceptions continue to influence how we judge ourselves today, often leading to feelings of inadequacy when we strive to meet diverse roles and responsibilities that go beyond traditional caregiving. There is no way to really get it right. And this is what I talked about in the first episode in terms of what is called competing devotions. So I'm very devoted to being a good mother, and being a good mother means all of the things that we've discussed. It means sacrificing myself, putting myself last, being there for my kids, not caring about anything else. This is my only priority. That's what a good mother is. But then I also want to be great at my career, and I want to do women right by not sacrificing everything. Do you see the contrast, the stark contrast? This is black and white. To be a good mother is completely different in so many levels when compared to being a good woman, in a sense. Being a woman that makes other women proud, being a woman that upholds these rights that we've gained, being a woman that proves to herself, to others, and especially men and the patriarchy that we do deserve to be in the workplace, and we do deserve equal pay, and we do deserve to be respected and seen as equals. But in order for that to happen, we need to show this level of dedication that completely erases our other devotion, our children. So moving into the societal standards, today's world bombards us women with mixed messages. On the one side, there's this progressive view that encourages us to pursue careers and personal aspirations. And then on the other, there's still this strong undercurrent of traditional expectations where my worth as a woman is often judged by my children's accomplishments and their happiness and the way they show up in the world. The social media platforms and even parenting books often offer an onslaught of advice and images depicting the ideal mother who can do it all, who can balance work and family and personal life without a crease in her smile. She's always smiling in magazines. She is always well-kept in social media. This ideal creates a toxic environment for real mothers living in real-world context, in real-world chaos, setting the stage for guilt and shame when perceived shortcomings arise. And while some people have started discussing this movement that's happening on social media, showing real, honest, raw motherhood as millennials distraught in motherhood. In my perspective, what's happening is we're trying to undo years of celebrities in magazines saying how they can have it all, how this narrative was created to punish feminists for asking to have more rights outside of the home, instead of providing them with the right support system in order to be able to do as much as men are doing. They were basically given the extra rights and they were told, yeah, okay, if you can handle it with all the motherhood stuff that you have to do, sure. This social media movement that is happening now is not the millennial generation saying it hates motherhood. What it really is a way to finally, slowly bring balance to this narrative of women who are worthy having to be able to basically have split lives It's not work-life balance that has you feeling guilty and shameful because you can't achieve it. What you can't achieve is to bring together two completely different worlds. And that is practically impossible. In the realm of motherhood, the gap between these idealized images and the reality of everyday parenting can really lead to significant emotional turmoil. Every decision that we make as mothers, from our feeding choices, like how do I feed my child, to the educational methods that we'll use, can feel fraught with the potential of judgment. But let's be honest here. It's not just these broad societal pressures that trigger guilt and shame. There are expectations that are expressed explicitly from people in our surroundings. There are family members, for instance, often with the best of intentions, who can be significant sources of guilt and shame. There are comments like, when I was raising you, we did it this way, or shouldn't you be staying at home with your child at this age? Which can have this implication that a mother's choices might be inadequate or wrong. These remarks, especially coming from close relatives or our own mothers, can carry a lot of weight, making a mother question her parenting style and her decisions. While sometimes it may be true that a mother may be trying to, very subconsciously, antagonize her daughter when she says these kinds of things, in many cases, what our mothers are trying to tell us is that there is another way. Due to the generational gap, though, there are many things that may no longer apply. And so as we enter motherhood as new moms, receiving this advice from our own mothers may feel more of a judgment. We may feel like we are incapable or even helpless rather than uplifted or inspired. And then again, there's also our partners who can also unknowingly contribute to these feelings of guilt and shame. Phrases like, "Are you sure you're handling this the right way?" Or even just plain observations like, "The baby seems so much happier when you're around more." Or, "Oh, they're so agitated. Maybe they're looking to breastfeed again," when they've just breastfed like 5 minutes ago. These may be intended as constructive feedback, but can end up feeling like criticisms of a mother's caregiving or her choices. But then, perhaps surprisingly, even strangers or acquaintances can trigger these feelings. So even people that we don't care about much or at all can say comments in public places about, let's say, our child's behavior, or give some unsolicited advice. Comments like these can deeply affect our sense of competence or worth, even though we've told ourselves that we don't care. Social media, too, exacerbates this with its endless streams of picture-perfect parenting moments, and then it's really hard not to compare your own stressful, messy realities with what you see on the internet. And while, hey, I also will take a picture of my home and my child when it's not in chaos, more or less we all do it. We know this to be true. We understand that, of course, you're going to choose the best out of 100 pictures to post online, and the best being the one that is most aesthetically pleasing. But then when we see this again and again and again and again, it's very difficult to keep on reminding ourselves of this and to believe it. So beyond external comments, internal triggers are also profound. Many of us internalize these societal ideals to the extent that we self-police our behavior, constantly feeling guilty or ashamed if we don't live up to the impossible standards of motherhood. This might manifest in personal thoughts like, "I'm not a good mom because I don't enjoy every moment with my child," or "I should be doing more like other moms on Instagram. How is she showing me a day in her life where she wakes up and she has the baby in hand and she's baking this amazing breakfast and she has this incredibly clean kitchen, and she also has in mind that I need to be filming this," and you follow her day and everything is happening with such flow and such beauty and it's all white and pretty. You really can't help but wonder, how is she coping so well? even though deep inside you know that this could be for many reasons. There are many answers for this. You could have lots of support, and it doesn't really matter. These triggers are not just passing comments or passing images. They are deeply woven into the daily experiences of us as mothers, affecting our emotional well-being and how we interact with our families. Recognizing these triggers, therefore, is the first step toward addressing them, understanding their origins, and ultimately mitigating their impact. Now, I would like to switch gears a little bit and explore how the feelings of guilt and shame manifest in our day-to-day lives, going into the profound impact that these emotions have on how we experience motherhood, how we show up as partners, and then how it affects our parenting. Guilt and shame can seep into our daily lives in very subtle and covert ways. For example, have you ever found yourself constantly second-guessing your decisions? Might you overcompensate by overscheduling yourself, by trying to do it all and be everywhere at once, which only serves to amplify your stress and exhaustion? Do you see yourself in any of these? The unrealistic pressure to perform perfectly as mothers sets us up for being in this harmful cycle that can be really hard to break without support and understanding. Over time, these feelings can drastically impact our self-esteem. Guilt can make us feel like we're never doing enough, and shame can attack our core identity, leading us to believe that we're never enough. Of course, you can understand that this eventually can spiral into us never feeling like we can really enjoy motherhood and preventing us from experiencing the joys of raising a child, as we're caught in this constant battle against our own self-doubt. Chronic guilt can lead to persistent feelings of sadness and frustration as we berate ourselves for both real and perceived failings. Shame will go even deeper than that. It can lead to serious conditions like depression and anxiety, as this constant self-criticism has the potential to erode our sense of worth and capability. Mental health struggles such as postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety are not uncommon among mothers who internalize these high standards and harsh self-judgments. As we continue to understand these ripple effects of guilt and shame, it's crucial to also consider how these emotions impact our marital relationship or our partnership. Guilt and shame can significantly influence the dynamics between partners, often leading to communication breakdowns, resentment, and an overall strain in the relationship. When we are overridden with guilt, we may become more withdrawn and oftentimes quite defensive because we're constantly feeling judged and inadequate. So it's very, very easy for us to get triggered. This defensiveness can then block open communication, making it difficult for us to express our needs and concerns effectively, and making our partners feel like they can't ever say anything right, because anything that they say is seen as a form of judgment. It may get to a point where the fact that they might even think to utter something, any kind of suggestion, any kind of observation, any kind of their own personal understanding of parenthood about themselves even, might be perceived as some form of criticism. As a result, we might avoid discussions about our own struggles too, for fear of being misunderstood. And this will lead to a lack of transparency. And then on the other hand, shame might cause us to internalize our feelings, believing that we must cope alone, that no one else feels this way, no one else is as bad of a mother as I am, and I need to resolve this on my own, because how can I ever share these thoughts? How can I ever share how incompetent I am? If I am lucky enough and he hasn't noticed, maybe I shouldn't be talking about it, right? But this silence can create a gap in the relationship, as the partner might be completely unaware of the depth of our distress. This can further isolate us from our marriage. Resentment can build up when there's a mismatch in expectations and reality. If we feel that our partner does not understand or support our struggles, or If we perceive that the caregiving burden is unequally shared, resentment can simmer. This resentment may also arise if a partner inadvertently adds to our feelings of guilt and shame by not aligning with our parenting decisions or by expressing disappointment in our actions or in our choices. But then again, are we talking about these things, or are we hoping that they should understand? Are we expecting that they should know that if they truly loved us, they would have figured it out on their own? The cumulative effect of ongoing communication difficulties and building resentment can lead to significant strain in the relationship. And this strain can manifest in frequent arguments, decreased intimacy, or an emotional disconnect. Over time, both partners will start to feel less satisfied with the marriage, seeing it as a source of stress rather than support. As mothers, we might grapple with our inner critic, fueled by guilt and shame. And then we might start to feel increasingly alienated, believing that we must meet all the expectations alone without burdening our partners. Addressing these issues in a marriage requires intentional effort from both partners. It involves fostering an environment where open, non-judgmental communication is the norm, and where both of us actively work to understand and support each other's experiences and feelings. Moving on from the partnership or the marriage, it's important to see how it is really the shame that disallows us from showing up the way that we want as mothers, rather than all the things we think we should have been doing. The impact of guilt and shame are not confined to ourselves as mothers or to the relationship that we have with our partners. These emotions profoundly impact the baby's upbringing and the overall parenting style that we have as well. When we are dealing with guilt, especially the type that stems from not spending enough time with our child or not being able to provide what we perceive as the best of everything, we might become overly protective. This overprotectiveness can manifest as being overly involved in every aspect of our child's life. While this might stem from a place of love and a desire to do better, like we said, because that's what guilt is meant for, it can inhibit our children's ability to explore, to make mistakes, to learn from these mistakes. The child might miss out on essential experiences that build resilience and self-confidence because we think we're supposed to be there at every step. We hold ourselves responsible for every moment of their happiness. Interestingly, guilt and shame can also lead to inconsistency in our parenting. And the reason for that is that as we start to feel that we're not doing enough or that we're not good enough, then we keep on looking at new books and new articles and more methods and other strategies that we need to be incorporating that we may have missed that are going to be better for our children in an attempt to alleviate our feelings of inadequacy. So then one day we might be showing up as overly strict, driven by the fear that we're not doing enough to discipline our child, that we may have been too loose and that it's our fault that they're showing up in specific ways behaviorally. And then the next day we might be feeling guilty, thinking that we were too harsh. And then we might become overly permissive, allowing behaviors that we previously discouraged. So then do you see the ambivalence? But you also see how natural this ambivalence is if you think about everything that's going on in our minds. We're always questioning, was I too permissive here? Was I too strict there? Am I doing it right? And so it's very natural that we will want to try out different techniques. But this inconsistency can be very confusing for us and for the child who needs to have predictable boundaries and consistent rules to feel secure and to develop healthy behavioral patterns. On the flip side, some mothers might cope with the guilt and the shame by becoming emotionally detached. So in this case, a mother becomes pulled back subconsciously from fully engaging with her child due to feelings of inadequacy or fear of making mistakes. This detachment can affect the emotional bond between the mother and the child, impacting the child's emotional development and their ability to form secure attachments in the future. And again, I want to normalize this and show you how natural it is that this would happen as well. All this internal struggle, all this internal battle at some point might just exhaust us. We start to become helpless and hopeless that we won't break out of the cycle. And at some point, it's very natural to become completely numb and to emotionally detract, not because I want to detach from my child, but because I can't be feeling like this any longer. Obviously, this is not something that we want for ourselves, for our marriage, and definitely not for our children. So let's talk about some effective strategies that can help us combat these feelings. It's crucial not just to recognize them, but to actively work on alleviating them. First, self-compassion. Always first. This is about being as kind to ourselves as we would be to a good friend in the same situation. One simple exercise that you could do is to write down the critical things you say to yourself, then consider whether you would say that ever to someone else, even if they weren't your friend. And if not, please write down a response that's kinder and more understanding. Practicing this regularly can help shift your internal dialogue from criticism to support, reducing feelings of guilt and shame. Another self-compassion exercise that you could try involves mindfulness meditation focused on self-kindness. This can be as simple as taking a few minutes each day to sit quietly, breathe, and consciously offer yourself words of kindness and encouragement. For example, you might say to yourself, "I'm doing the best I can, and that's enough." I'm not a firm believer in self-affirmations. I don't think they are enough. And that's very ironic for me to say in this episode. I think that they are a good tool, but they don't address the root of the issue. If they are to be effective, they cannot be the only thing that you do, and they definitely need to be done very, very consistently. So I really wanted to make this caveat here and explain that a lot of times these self-affirmations seem too good to be true. You may have tried them and they may have not worked. And so I want to affirm your beliefs. Alone, they don't do much. And also, if we do them once every week when we remember to do them, they're obviously not going to be at all effective. However, this practice does help center our thoughts, and it does help us be more conscious of putting a stop to the cycle rather than just letting it spiral, reducing the impact of stress and negative emotion. Then they're seeking support because no mother is an island. Doing so is very crucial. This can be as straightforward as talking to a friend or a family member or your partner about your feelings, or it could be joining a parent support group where you can share experiences and strategies with others who really understand what you're going through. In the same light, there's also professional help such as therapy or counseling or motherhood coaching programs like the one that I offer that can also be invaluable, providing a safe space to explore these emotions, this really safe container to develop strategies to manage guilt and shame. And finally, there's setting realistic parenting goals. It's really easy to fall into the trap of aiming for perfection, which only fuels guilt and shame when those standards are inevitably not met. Instead, it's important to focus on what is achievable and healthy for you and your family. Setting small, manageable goals can help build confidence and reduce pressure. What do I mean? For example, instead of aiming to never raise your voice, it would be easier and better, much, much better, for all of you, including your child, to set a goal to take a 5-minute break when you feel overwhelmed, and to also expect that you will raise your voice sometimes and that that's okay. This shift in perspective can significantly decrease feelings of failure and inadequacy because we're not aiming for perfection. We are having a clear expectation of what can happen and for when I feel overwhelmed, what I can do instead. By incorporating these strategies into your daily routine, you can begin to lessen the grip that guilt and shame have over you. But I do want to also give you something a little bit extra, something a little bit more unique of an approach, which includes my two favorite strategies or approaches, call them what you want: mindfulness and narrative therapy. Combining them can actually be very helpful for us mothers to reframe our personal stories about motherhood, shifting from a narrative of guilt and shame to one of growth and understanding. Mindfulness involves being present and fully engaged with whatever we're doing, free from distraction or judgment, with a soft and open mind. An example of this in practice is a mindfulness exercise where you notice negative thoughts, you visualize them as they leave, thinking of them kind of like floating down a river, acknowledging their presence, but letting them drift without attaching to them, without thinking anything about them, without judging them, without commenting on them, nothing. And then narrative therapy builds on this by helping us to reauthor our personal stories. For us mothers, then, this might mean shifting the story from "I'm a bad mother because I work full time and miss out on time with my children" to "I'm a loving mother who models hard work and dedication to my children." This approach encourages us to see ourselves as the authors of our own stories, empowering us to rewrite narratives that have been shaped by guilt and shame. To put this into practice, start by identifying a recurring negative thought that contributes to your feelings of guilt and shame. Write the thought down and then, using mindfulness, observe this thought each time it arises without engaging with it emotionally. After a week, use the narrative therapy technique to write down a new story. Focus on your strengths and the positive aspects of your motherhood journey that contradict this negative thought. I know that in the beginning, changing the narrative might feel like you're lying to yourself, and it might feel like you want to stop. This is why it's very important for you to first practice the mindfulness technique where you let the thought go so your brain starts to learn not to attach any meaning to the thought and not to engage with the thought, so it can start to feel a little bit less your own and truly kind of like an intruder type of thought. As it starts to feel this way, then you can start changing the story. Even if it still feels like you're lying to yourself, it's important that you keep on doing it because at some point it will start to feel true. So consistently keep changing the narrative. By regularly practicing these techniques, this can lead to a more positive and empowered narrative. This will not just help get rid of the guilt and the shame. In essence, it will really just overall enhance your mental well-being. Because I don't want to drag this episode any longer, if you would also like to focus on a specific hands-on tool that can make a real difference, I have created a guided journal prompt designed to reframe an incident of guilt and shame into a learning or bonding opportunity. This exercise not only aids in processing feelings, but it also turns challenging moments into chances for growth and connection. There are several questions that I found to be helpful with my own clients. I have created a one-page PDF that I am sharing with you for free at markelakaplani.com/momguilt. Get the questions, see which ones resonate with you, and answer them in your journal. And if you do this, I would love it if you would share your feedback with me if you're feeling called to do so. But before we go, if you are a father, a partner that is listening to this episode, it's crucial that you are also involved in this process because you can be a powerful catalyst. Therefore, I did want to dedicate a small section to talk about how you as the partner can recognize the signs of these emotions of guilt and shame and how you can actively participate in exercises that foster support and understanding within your relationship. So first, it's important for you as the partner to recognize the signs that the mother of your child might be struggling with guilt or shame. These signs can be very subtle or overt, ranging from frequent self-criticism to withdrawing from social activities or family interactions. She might express feelings of inadequacy by doubting her decisions or constantly comparing herself to other mothers. If you notice these behaviors, it's likely that guilt or shame may be at play, so it would be something for you to consider. Then comes in active listening, which is a crucial skill for partners. It involves more than just hearing words. It's about fully concentrating on what is being said, understanding it, and then responding thoughtfully. As the partner, you can practice this by giving your full attention during conversations, avoiding interruptions, and then trying to reflect back what it is you've heard to show that you've understood. This practice helps your partner feel valued and supported, creating a safer space for her to express her emotions and thoughts without fearing that she's being judged or criticized, or at least with her being able to kind of lower her defenses and her triggers. Another powerful tool is shared journaling. This can be very effective for you guys as a couple so that you can connect and communicate. It involves setting time aside to write down thoughts, feelings, and experiences related to parenting and personal growth, which then you guys can share and discuss openly. This activity is very helpful because it can enhance empathy and understanding between the two of you. And then lastly, for you as the partner, it's also important to acknowledge your own role and impact in the shared dynamics of parenting. Understanding that parenting is a team effort and showing a willingness to share responsibilities can alleviate a significant amount of pressure from the mother. You can initiate discussions about how to balance responsibilities more effectively and explore ways to support each other's parenting efforts. If your support is limited to affirmations, such as "you're doing a great job, I believe in you, I have no doubt you're the best mother for our child," these are all nice and dandy. But like I said with the self-affirmation, it's not enough, because if you're saying all of this, but then you are dedicating your time elsewhere, you are not showing that even if I have very little time, even if I am very tired, I understand that what you're doing is very tiring. Don't just say that in words. Show me in actions. If this is an important job, if I am doing very well, if you do find that this is very tough, then how are you helping lift some of that for me as my partner? Right? By engaging in these activities, you as the partner can play a significant role in mitigating the effects of guilt and shame, enhancing the emotional health of the relationship and the well-being of the family as a whole. As we wrap up today's conversation on overcoming or dealing with mom guilt and shame, I encourage all of you listening to try applying these strategies in your daily lives, whether it's taking 5 minutes each day for self-compassion meditation, or opening up to a friend about your feelings, or sitting down with your partner for a shared journaling session. Every small step is a move toward a healthier, happier parenting experience. And if you found today's episode helpful, please share, subscribe, and review. It means more than you know and more than I can express in words. Thank you for joining me today. Remember, you're doing a wonderful job and you're not alone in this journey. Until next time, take care of yourself. See you next Sunday.